welcome to EQaboveIQ-Parenting with Emotional Intelligence and Healing the Inner Child. My name is Trina Casey, and I'm your host, and thank you for joining me again this week. Wow. There's so much going on. It took me a minute. I can't even pinpoint this week about what to start talking about, but the thing that is top of mind for me as a parent is the amount of mass shootings. It seems like every year I pop into this subject because every year it keeps happening. And we are in May now, and I think there's been 223 mass shootings since the year started, which is above the average. Not even the average. I think it's just like beyond the average. But the point I'm trying to make is that we got to get this gun stuff figured out. I mean, it is the Second Amendment BS is just not flying anymore. What I'm starting to see is that, and I've been seeing this for a long time, is just that we have an infrastructure that has been gaslighting us into thinking that they care about our children, but they don't care about our children. I will say it like I always say it. The education system is an indoctrination system. Basically, it's something that was modeled off of a war in Poland several decades ago. And, they saw that it worked to program the Polish into, I'm sighing because I'm just so exhausted at talking about this, but I'm going to talk about it anyway. Indoctrination is about telling and programming the people how to think, not to be critical thinkers, to be followers, to be fear-based, to be uneducated, because most of the education system that we are, or most of the stuff we learned in school actually is not really applicable to real life. So what are we doing? What are we doing? We're just making little micro systems, micro hegemony within the macro hegemony. And we're training our kids to be subservient, and we're training our kids to not think for themselves, and we're training our kids to be fear-based. We're training our kids to believe instead of inquiring, believe instead of knowing. It's just really frustrating. My son is 12. Education has always been a trauma because of bullying, both academically and racially motivated. My kid has ADHD, and it makes it a little bit harder, and it takes more repetition, it takes more support. And the system is not set up for that. And as we see, almost 50% of the population has ADHD, which, I've got a whole bunch of other words that could replace ADHD, which stands for attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. And there's so many other things that actually explain it far more accurately than ADHD, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. I would say that it is acute depression caused by horrific oppression. There's all kinds of things. I just recently posted on LinkedIn about it because, I'm just really tired of this blaming everyone else for a system that is totally been just about 5% of the population controlling the other, which is basically essentially hegemony. And if you don't know what that word is, please look it up because it will save your life and it will give you a greater perspective about and why we are living the way that we do and why we're raising our kids the way that we do and how we can take steps to change that. There are some great people that I am working with and following that talk about, changing things. There's a big event going on in Colorado pretty soon and I think it's in October or maybe sooner than that. I apologize to the organizers. I just can't. I got too many things in my head. But basically, we're putting the onus, as a Black mother, I've been shouting this for a long time. I think all melanated women have been shouting this for a long time. We need to get guns out of schools. We need to get better education. We need to get better support for ADHD and autism and ADD. I always liken it to avoidance of daily hegemonic dictatorship. That's a good acronym for ADHD. Or what about abuse derived from hegemonic despotism? Or how about acute depression from hegemonic delusion? And ADD could easily be called acute desire to disconnect because the brain can only do so much in a day, but the demand on us to produce and this objectification for a production model created by the Rothschilds and the Rockefellers of the heyday of the early industrial revolution does nothing for humanity and has done nothing for humanity. And when the ship is about to sink, it's just they do their grand reset, destroy everything, and then everyone who was already struggling struggles more, and they're just fine. They're cushy. Matter of fact, they actually make money off of the destruction of society every time it happens. And, I won't call it civilization anymore because it's not civilized. We've got big corporations like BlackRock and Blackstone, which is its mother company, doing all this undercover crap and going in and creating wards in different parts of the world just to aggrandize themselves and keep wealthy and yeah. I know I've talked about this a few times on each episode, but the reason why I need everybody to know these truths is that that's the only way that we're going to actually shift out of the ideology and the understanding that we are just a part of a system that really doesn't care about us. I think about that song by Michael Jackson. All I want to say is they really don't care about us. And they're proving it all the time. So what do we have to do? We have to become more emotionally intelligent, and we have to become more self-aware, and we have to care about us. We have to have radical compassion for where we are. We have to stop blaming ourselves for the problems that we have and start looking at the macro causes. From even how we think has been programmed. We are programmed to even think a certain way about ourselves. And those of us who think outside of that box are quote unquote not normal, or there's something wrong with the people who are like, wait. This is not connecting. So as I coach people, I really want them to understand that a lot of the circumstances that they have been experienced, they did not create. They did not create this. And the moment we kind of give ourselves that radical compassion, we can start to heal. We will never heal until we start looking at the macro influences and the hegemony. We will not be able to raise our children differently. We will not be able to see that race and sex and all that kind of stuff, that division is just a construct in order to keep us from having peace, keep us from coming together in unity to push up against 5% of the population who controls almost all of the wealth. I just learned about another family in Europe called the Wallenbergs. Yeah, they basically own all of Europe and had no clue who they were. See, people, we need to educate ourselves constantly. We need to know that your neuroplasticity is, you can learn until you're 100 years old. Don't believe those lies. I mean, we have to go even back and reconstruct what science is, what spirituality, what all this stuff is again, because it's not disconnected. It's all interconnected. Disconnection creates an opportunity for profit. So you make your little niche, and then all of a sudden you got niche marketing, you got all this stuff, and you got people believing things that are not true. I was watching a documentary the other day, which I constantly do. I watch and read educational stuff. I'm not interested in the current media cycle that's constantly going. I pop in once in a while and watch Democracy Now! Actually, I only watch their weekly recap just to see. Because I like Democracy Now! Because they don't give opinion. They just give you what happened. And then you can connect the pieces of the puzzle if you have enough knowledge and education about the subject. And then if you don't, go look it up. Go find different resources. Never read just one. I always say I read the top 10 and then I take from the top 10 the truth. Because I also think that we have universal truth that is encoded in our DNA, that we have ancestors after ancestors that passed on wisdom. So I'm reading this book by Gabor Mate and his son Daniel Mate called The Myth of Normal: Trauma, Illness, and Healing in a Toxic Culture. And I would just about peed my pants. I was like, finally! I'm not a huge fan of mainstream psychology, which I will say over and over again because I feel like it's just a part of the gaslight in order to oppress people at this point. And I think more and more mainstream psychologists and people who are studying the field of psychology are starting to see this. If you have a very small sphere of interest or bubble of interest, you will not really get the full picture of our existence on this planet. So be curious, stay curious, and always read. So I started listening to the book, and, he basically has said what I've been saying for the last 15 years. Little old me, little non important me, have come to a lot of these conclusions long before this book was written. But it was really affirming that this person who was born in the 1940s, who had gone through the wars, who is Jewish, Polish Jew, who has suffered major trauma, has finally come to the realization after practicing as a medical doctor and a psychiatrist or psychologist that, yeah, the problem is not us. Mm? It's the culture. And the culture was built this way on purpose. I'll go back to indoctrinating our kids into an education system of lives so that they can feel a certain way about themselves. And as a mother of a melanated child who's half pale scale and half melanated, you know, it's really vital for me for him to learn to love himself through my trauma, through his father's trauma. I'm constantly trying to reinforce that. But the point is that I really want my child to understand that his mental well-being is above mine. And if I cause some distress or trauma, we need to talk about it. We need to work it out. I need to take accountability. Where did that come from? Where did that comment? We just had an interesting conversation about shut up. And I spent most of his life saying, can you please be quiet? Not really understanding the ADHD at that time, but I get really hyper focused doing work or doing anything actually. I'm sound sensitive as well with my ADD, which was diagnosed much later in my life, but I'm sound sensitive. I'm like, stop. And I think it's frequency sensitive, to tell you the truth. I'm like, I cannot stand the music of today. Oof, it is exhausting just hearing all that auto tune and all that stuff. I was like, what happened to music? I feel like an old person for saying that, but it's true. The frequency is not the same music as it was when it was on records. And yeah, I can still remember all that. So my point is this: until we get real about what's really happening in the world and we get knowledgeable about what's going on in the world, we're going to keep the same cycle and the same people in charge of that cycle. Don't get me started on AI. I'm gonna get this started on AI. AI, though it has all these amazing capabilities, it is still programmed by the same people. And then those people have no conscience or they have no desire to move forward with equity and integrity and transparency. We're going to have the same problem. The only difference is we're going to be deeper in a psychosis and a cognitive dissonance that doesn't allow us to see that we're living in an illusionary world of delusion, to tell you the truth, delusion of freedom, delusion of intelligence. AI is just another gaslight. AI is a deeper hole to be dug in, and AI is dangerous. And it's already being used to con people out of their money. Just saw a young lady post on a TikTok talking about how someone used AI to replicate her little brother's voice and call her grandfather, to try to dupe him out of money. You know, people, can you please use your genius for something positive? But see, when you create a world where it's only about capitalism, when it's all about a dog eat dog world, people start using their imagination and creativity for the dark side, as I call it. I'm a big Star Wars fan, but it is so true. They just go to this dark side instead of using their genius to protect people, for example, from AI being used to rob and steal from you. They do the exact opposite. And, a lot of these companies are working out from India, like the ones that would call and, target your old grandma. They tried to get me too. I was like, I'm not that old. I'm not that stupid. And I just laugh. I start asking them questions. So how's your day going? How many people do you usually scam out of their money during the day? What's your average? What are your KPIs? I start messing with them because it's absolutely ridiculous that they are targeting them, the last of the vulnerable in this world, the people who want to do good, or the ones that are older that can't understand technology and how it works. And so, they're already struggling to just log on to the computer to go into their bank account to pay their bills. You know, I would say my mother and I would say my father are in that category. They just, they're used to going into the bank and dealing with things. So as we move more and more and more into a technological colony that we are going to we're going to leave a lot of people vulnerable. And so those people out there who created this AI scam, please, please, please find some humanity, find your heart again and stop it, because you're obviously extremely intelligent and I applaud you, but can we use it for good and not evil? It's just that we don't need to be doing this to each other and teaching our kids that this is how our world is, that you can't trust anybody. Somebody else contacted me and we were talking about how the way there is no trust. Basically, he was like, you don't tell people your dreams, don't tell people your aspirations, don't tell people. And I was like, a part of me gets it, but another part of me is like very heartbroken, because there was a time when we lived in a more egalitarian way where we supported each other's dreams, where that dream supported the next person's dream. And it was a domino effect of building up culture in such a manner. It was community based, and that all got turned to skepticism and to be a cynic. And that's what capitalism has created for the world. No one feels safe anymore to trust. There's a few of us out there that push through and are manifesting the lives that we want, and even through the tough times. See, for some reason, there's a fallacy that in order to be happy, that you don't have difficult times, when actually that's the furthest from the truth. Happiest people I see in the world are the ones that have very little, that don't have all the technology that we have, that don't have the ease of, entitled comfort, or the desire for entitled comfort is what I see as the big problem. So people are stepping on each other's necks in order to find this quote unquote lifestyle of luxury. And then once you get all of that stuff, guess what? You're not happy anyway. Because there's a karmic footprint that is created by people's actions, whether they see it or not. Look at the world right now. We are currently living in a karmic footprint that the hegemony has created. And it could be easily corrected if they just stop it. And so back to the guns. We got to get guns out of schools. We got to get guns out of hands. Serbia just turned in 300,000 guns, I think it was, because there were a lot of illegal arms in Serbia, but they had 1 or 2 school shootings, and that was enough. Millions of people showed up, and they turned in their guns. Simple. They turned in their guns because they no longer wanted to risk the lives of their children in school, their children going to malls like this recent one. And what really, grinds my gears is that it was race related. It was, another Aryan brother, fear-based person, male, deciding that terrorism is the only way to keep control. Well, where did he learn that? Our history. American history, United States and other countries included, have been using terrorism instead of love and communication and civil discourse to control the people, because that's all they got. Watching Cleopatra, I just watched that documentary Cleopatra, where she's obviously mixed race in there, and people are moaning and groaning, the Egyptians, and she wasn't black. I'm like, dude, your country's in the middle of Africa. Come on. You know what? Nobody knows exactly what she would look like because she wasn't there. We weren't there. But I know for sure she wasn't that much on the pale scale. You know what I mean? And that has to do with a lot of Egyptian history, because the people who controlled the narrative of archaeology have always been white males, pale scale males. And when you control the narrative, you control the artifacts, you control the narrative. That's why the Rothschilds and the Rockefellers have some of the biggest collections of antiquities in the world, bigger than museums. That's why the Smithsonian was founded. We are hiding our true history and origins, and they're doing their darndest to continue in countries like Iraq and Iran, where the hotbed of antiquities and history, it was started. I mean, the Sumerians, now they're bombing Sudan, another very, very strong historical area. They're bombing Ethiopia, same thing. There's a trend, okay? There's a trend. Just watched this documentary about this huge sinkholes in Russia and the release of methane gas due to the melting of the permafrost. But, big holes are being exploded from there to Alaska. We have got to change our behavior as a species. Not we, me and you, because we're basically along for the ride, but we can educate ourselves. We have to make decisions about where we invest our money and our time and our imagination to stop those 5% people from doing what they're doing, robbing our children of their future. And that includes guns, that includes food production, that includes everything you can possibly think under the sun is been influenced by people who don't care about us. They don't care about us. So what do? We care about ourselves. We care about our neighbors. We care about our friends and family. And I know a lot of families, including my own, have been fractured by this system of oppression, by the hegemony. And guess what? My door is always open for my friends and my family, but I'm not going back to sleep. And I think that's probably one of the biggest challenges on an emotional level, is that once you're awake, you stay awake. You can't go back to sleep. And not that I don't sleep well, I sleep peacefully because I rather know than not know. And I make authentic connections, like many of the people that follow me on this podcast, many of the people who are in like mind, many of the people who are even challenging some of the things that I say because, oh, you don't have a doctorate in this and that. And I was like, okay, go ahead and look it up. A lot of people end up eating crow because I don't say what I don't know. I don't say what I don't marinate in my brain before I say it. And then the things that I do say that can't be 100% proven are from spirit. Mind, body, spirit connection. They're not separated. And when we get to this integrated or integral system that needs to be in place, we'll all be a lot more peaceful and we'll all be a lot healthier and happier. So let's get gun control out of the conversation. It should be common sense at this point. And the more that we see people not passing legislation, we see what their agenda is. Okay? Just be aware. Be aware. Choose wisely. And if you can, organize. And there's people out there organizing right now. And so I applaud you. I support you. And please, 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 please go support this podcast by subscribing and going to thisreallifebooks.com. You can subscribe to this podcast by clicking the link under the podcast and do it monthly, weekly. You can also click on the link in Anchor, and you can click in the link in Spotify, all of them. And I'm also an artist. I've been for a very long time. So I'm creative on all levels. I have some children's books that you can check out at thisreallifebooks.com. And then you can also, I created a clothing line called Gentle Reminders that reminds us parents who are in survival mode to find ways to reconnect with our kids and make sure that they are emotionally intelligent and remind us that the way we are, they're our mirrors and they see what we do and they learn respect from our respect, things like that. And also, finally, I have a website displaying my artwork called Ascension Beings of Light. That's going to be in the links here for the information, where I am creating digital art. I have been for a while. Finally honed a lot of my Adobe skill set. And it's something that I do to relax, but it's also a reflection of my spiritual beliefs of our interstellar and collective connection. So go to thisreallifebooks.com, find any way that you can to support this podcast, because every little bit helps me support my son as a single mom. It also, share it, spread the message about the Grand Awakening, because we are on this path. And if we use EQ above IQ and heal our inner child, we are going to have a much better world. Anyways, thank you for listening and have a blessed day.